This is Turkmenistan, a land of immense, almost unbelievable natural wealth. A nation with the fourth largest proven natural gas reserves. We're talking about a staggering 13.6 trillion cubic meters of gas, enough energy to power an entire continent for decades. Logically, its 7.6 million citizens should be living lives of unparalleled prosperity like a modern-day Kuwait or Qatar. But the reality couldn't be more different. For the average Turkmen, life is a desperate struggle. The average monthly salary hovers around a mere $200 to $400. Inflation is rampant and reports of food shortages are tragically common. A nation with trillions of dollars under its soil, yet its people are trapped in poverty and isolation. While the regime pours billions into building a Potemkin capital of marble and gold, its people struggle to make ends meet. As recently as 2025, international organizations found that Turkmenistan has the highest rate of severe food insecurity in the entire former Soviet region, with nearly 800,000 people unable to secure enough food to live a healthy life. So how is this even possible? How can a country with such staggering wealth be such a catastrophic failure for its own people? Where does all the money go? To answer that, we need to pull back the marble facade and enter one of the most bizarre, repressive, and secretive dictatorships on the planet. Okay, so in 1991, when the USSR crumbled, republics across the empire declared their independence. But you see, Turkmenistan was a bit different. It was a quiet, conservative Soviet backwater, a vast desert nation of nomadic tribes that had been under Moscow's firm control for decades. There was no major independence movement, no popular uprising. In fact, in a referendum just months before the final collapse, the Turkmen had voted overwhelmingly to preserve the Soviet Union. Their leader was a man named Saparmurat Niyazov, a career communist apparatchik who had been installed by Moscow in 1985. So when the Soviet Union officially ceased to exist on December 26, 1991, Niyazov, the old communist boss, found himself in charge of a new country. There was no democratic transition. The Communist Party was simply renamed the Democratic Party of Turkmenistan, keeping the entire Soviet-era structure of one-party rule completely intact. In 1992, Niyazov was elected president. He was the only candidate on the ballot and won with an implausible 99.5% of the vote. He didn't have to build a dictatorship from scratch, he just personalized the one that already existed. In December 2006, when Niyazov died of a heart attack, the country's Security Council installed Niyazov's personal dentist and the Minister of Health, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, as the new leader. The ruling elite, who had grown rich under Niyazov's system, had no intention of allowing any reform. So they chose a successor they believed would ensure the system of power and patronage would continue without interruption. Which isn't surprising since the entire country is run like a private family business, a kleptocracy if you will, where all the profits from its immense natural gas wealth flow directly into the pockets of a tiny ruling elite. In 2024, Transparency International ranked Turkmenistan 165th out of 180 countries in its Corruption Perceptions Index, with a score of just 17 out of 100. But you get the picture. So I think it's time I introduce you to the ruling family and their inner circle. So the ruling family are of course the Berdimuhamedovs, who hold absolute power. Sardar Berdimuhamedov is the current ruler who succeeded his father in a continuing hereditary pattern of power. Relatives and cronies control the most lucrative sectors from energy to construction and trade, amassing vast personal fortunes through state contracts and nepotism. An investigation by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project revealed that the husband of the former president's niece secretly acts as the general director of the country's only mobile operator. Food shortages are chronic, as we've mentioned, and in cities and towns across the country, people are forced to spend hours waiting in long lines for subsidized and often poor quality bread, flour, and cooking oils. The economy itself is a fiction. The government maintains an official currency exchange rate, but it's meaningless. The real economy runs on a thriving black market where the US dollar can be worth 10 times the official rate. Since Turkmenistan imports more than half of its food, this black market rate is what dictates the actual price of goods, leading to crippling hyperinflation for ordinary people. A family can spend up to 80% of their income just on food. Public services have all but collapsed. The education and healthcare systems have been systemically degraded over decades. The country's first dictator, Niyazov, famously closed all hospitals outside the capital, declaring, quote, "If people are ill, they can come to Ashgabat." This legacy of brutal neglect continues. Freedom House, an organization that tracks democracy and civil liberties, gives Turkmenistan a global freedom score of just 1 out of 100. The state has constructed a digital iron curtain. All media, television, radio, newspapers, it's all state-controlled and exists for one purpose only: to sing the praises of the leader, also known as propaganda. Internet access is agonizingly slow, expensive, and heavily censored. Most of the global internet, including social media sites, messenger apps, and independent news sources, is completely blocked. The government actively hunts down people who use VPNs to bypass the blocks, subjecting them to interrogation, fines, and even arrest. This digital control is enforced in the real world by an omnipresent secret police, the MNS, or the Ministry for National Security, the direct successor to the Soviet KGB, by the way. They conduct constant surveillance, monitor private phone calls, and ruthlessly harass anyone deemed suspicious. Independent journalists who dare to report on the reality of life in Turkmenistan face a terrifying ordeal. But for those who openly challenge the state, there is a final terrifying weapon: enforced disappearance. People who oppose the government simply vanish. They are swallowed by the country's brutal prison system, and their families never hear from them again. They don't even know if they are alive or dead. The international campaign, Prove They Are Alive, has documented at least 162 such cases since the early 2000s, with 97 still completely unresolved. So it's clear, the ruling elite have this country in a chokehold. But the more interesting story, I think, might be how they've accomplished this and how they managed to stay in power. See, it's all made possible through a system of fear and carefully constructed propaganda that I alluded to earlier. See, the first dictator, Saparmurat Niyazov, wasn't content with just being president. So he gave himself the title Turkmenbashi, meaning head of the Turkmen. And he also put his face everywhere, on every banknote, on bottles of vodka, and on the corner of the state television screen 24 hours a day. Every broadcast began with a pledge that the announcer's tongue would shrivel if they ever slandered the country, the flag, or the president. He then decided to rewrite reality itself, which is a funny story because in 2002 he passed a law renaming the months of the year and the days of the week. January was now Turkmenbashi, April became Gomen Sultan after his mother, and September became Runama in honor of his own book. He didn't just stop there, he even abolished the Turkmen word for bread, replacing it with his mother's name, Gomen Sultan. The Runama, the book I alluded to earlier, was Turkmenbashi's magnum opus. It was called the Book of the Soul. It was a strange and rambling mix of autobiography, revisionist history, and spiritual guidance. It became the country's holy text. Knowledge of the book was made compulsory for almost everything. It was taught in schools from first grade through university. You had to pass an exam on it to get a government job. You even had to pass an exam on it to get a driver's license. And I guess most wild of all, Turkmenbashi claimed he had made a deal with God. Anyone who read this book 3 times would be guaranteed a direct path to heaven. Yeah, sounds about right. But anyway, with time his decrees became increasingly surreal. He banned opera, ballet, and even the circus, declaring them insufficiently Turkmen. He outlawed beards and long hair for men. He also banned gold teeth, advising his people to instead chew on bones to strengthen their teeth and prevent decay, remarking that this is what dogs do. He ordered the construction of a 130-foot pyramid, a man-made lake, and a massive ice palace. And of course, there were the statues as well. As we all know, dictators apparently love statues of themselves. And he made thousands of them. The most famous was the Arch of Neutrality, a $12 million monument topped with a 40-foot tall golden statue of himself, which rotated 360 degrees to always face the sun. Yeah, he's a crazy guy. But after Niyazov, when Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov took power, he seemed like a more modern, less eccentric figure. He restored the old calendar names and quietly removed the giant rotating statue of his predecessor. But he soon began building his own equally bizarre personality cult, updated for the digital age, of course. He started portraying himself as a multi-talented action hero. He gave himself the title Akadak, meaning the protector, and state television began broadcasting an endless stream of propaganda showcasing his supposed superhuman abilities. He wins races against professional jockeys, acts as the DJ at lavish parties, even performs rap songs with his grandson. His cabinet members, well, they are often seen frantically taking notes or giving him standing ovations for these feats. Like his predecessor, Arkadag also has a thing for golden statues and animal obsessions. He is a fanatical devotee of two national breeds. First, the Akateke horse, a creature he has written books about. He even had himself named the People's Horse Breeder, immortalized with a giant bronze and gold leaf statue of himself riding one. His other obsession is the Alabay Shepherd dog. He created a national holiday in its honor, and in 2020, during the COVID pandemic, while his country was deep in an economic crisis with widespread food shortages, he unveiled a 50-foot tall gold leaf statue of an Alabay in the center of a new roundabout in the capital. Behind all these comical stunts and surreal monuments, the grim reality of this police state continued. The censorship, the corruption, the fear, none of it ever went away. The style of the dictatorship changed, but its substance remained exactly the same. In February 2022, after 15 years in power, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov made a surprise announcement. He resigned to make way for, quote, young leaders. This triggered a snap presidential election, the timing of which was no coincidence, of course. His son, Sardar Berdimuhamedov, had recently turned 40, the minimum age required to become president under the constitution that his father had conveniently amended years earlier. The election was, of course, a farce. Sardar ran against a slate of 8 unknown token candidates. So on March 12, 2022, he was declared the winner with nearly 73% of the vote in a process widely condemned as fraudulent. In his inauguration speech, Sardar left no doubt about the future. He pledged to continue on the, quote, glorious path of his father. There would be no reform and no liberation. But this wasn't just a simple transfer of power. It was a sophisticated restructuring of the entire dictatorship itself. See, the classic problem for any authoritarian ruler is how to secure their legacy, wealth, and family after they're gone. Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov engineered a novel solution. In January 2023, the constitution was changed yet again. The upper house of parliament, the Halk Manati or People's Council, was transformed into a new supreme governing body, placed above the president and given the power to change the constitution itself. And can you guess who was appointed as chairman for life? Yeah, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov. He was also granted the new official constitutional title, National Leader of the Turkmen People. This created a tandem dictatorship. The son Sardar handles the day-to-day duties of the presidency, while Gurbanguly still remains the ultimate authority, the supreme leader who pulls the strings from his new constitutionally superior position. It was a system designed to dynasty-proof the regime, but in reality it only ensured the family's grip on power for generations to come. Today, nothing has changed for the people of Turkmenistan. The kleptocracy is more entrenched than ever, the same human rights abuses, the same censorship, the same economic misery continue unabated. The only difference is that now, in every government office and school across the country, 2 portraits hang on the wall, the father and the son. The system of repression and plunder remains perfectly intact, simply with a new face at the presidential desk. So yeah, you get the picture. But what I found strange about this country is how little the media has been covering it, and even more so, how there seems to be no international pressure against it. Which it turns out has to do with the country's foreign policy, a carefully executed geopolitical strategy. See, the cornerstone of the regime's foreign policy is a doctrine of permanent neutrality, a status which even the United Nations officially recognizes. On the surface, it sounds noble, but in practice, the regime has masterfully used this policy as a shield to deflect all external pressures regarding its abysmal human rights record. By avoiding military alliances and regional conflicts, it gives the world's major powers very little reason to get involved. This isolation is actively maintained by leveraging the competing interests of great powers like China and Russia. Over the past 2 decades, Turkmenistan has pivoted hard towards China, which has become the overwhelming consumer of its natural gas exports. The massive Central Asia-China pipeline makes Turkmenistan the single largest supplier of pipeline gas to the world's second largest economy. This has created a profound dependency. Turkmenistan effectively swapped one master, Russia, for another. China is now not only its biggest customer, but also a key creditor, having loaned billions for gas field development to be repaid with future gas supplies. This gives Beijing immense leverage and ensures that China will block any meaningful action against the regime at the UN. Its primary interest is a stable, uninterrupted flow of cheap gas, not the human rights of the Turkmen people. And we can say they've definitely achieved that. Turkmenistan also maintains a somewhat complex relationship with Russia. After years of disputes, Russia now buys only a small amount of Turkmen gas, not because it needs it, but for geopolitical reasons. Russia's goal here is to prevent Turkmenistan from becoming an exclusive Chinese satellite and crucially to block any potential rival projects like a Trans-Caspian pipeline that would carry Turkmen gas to Europe, bypassing Russia. The result is a geopolitical black hole. The regime has made itself indispensable to China's energy security, neutralizing pressure from the West, and it maintains just enough of a relationship with Russia to keep Moscow from becoming hostile. It's honestly genius. And its neutrality policy provides the perfect excuse to reject any calls for reform from the US or the EU. It's a masterclass in autocratic survival. The dire situation in Turkmenistan is not the result of incompetence or bad luck, it is the direct and calculated outcome of a system of totalitarian kleptocracy. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.